Chapter 4895. Yiqing Luo passed through a few rooms. Her gaze locked onto the front. In the middle of the courtyard was the largest and most luxurious house. She could vaguely see the bright luminous pearl light, like a star in the dark night. Was there? Yiqing Luo stared at that huge house. But her footsteps slowly came to a halt. That familiar voice seemed to be reverberating in her mind. Over and over again it reminded her, that was indeed Dmo Shen's voice. Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes, her gaze landed on the red ring on her slender fingertip. One could vaguely see a vivid and lifelike phoenix stretching its most beautiful figure on the blood jade-like ring. She gently stroked the ring. This profound phoenix ring was a mandarin duck ring like Dmo Shen's profound dragon ring. Dmo Shen was really here. The profound phoenix ring should have some reaction. But now, the profound phoenix ring had no reaction at all. This was why. Yiqing Luo curled her fingers tightly. Her gaze was on the profound phoenix ring, quietly staring for a while. She took a deep breath and moved toward the room again without making a sound. Just as she got closer, Yiqing Luo heard a sound coming from inside the room. It was a woman's light footsteps and a gentle and elegant laughter. This laughter was inexplicably piercing. A man and a woman alone in this place. And they were laughing so happily. What was so funny? Yiqing Luo suppressed the surging unhappiness in her chest and calmed herself down. What she heard was false. She couldn't simply imagine. Yiqing Luo held her breath and followed the direction of the laughter to confirm the woman's location. Following that direction, she quietly moved closer. Her movements were very light. While moving, there was no sound at all. She neared the innermost room's window. Yiqing Luo looked through the half-opened window. She saw the bright luminous pearl light spilling out from the window. Yiqing Luo turned sideways and quietly looked through the window at the situation inside the room. Inside the room, the furnishings were elegant and there was a faint fragrance. One look and you knew it was an exquisite woman's study room. The surroundings were filled with bookshelves and all kinds of books. There was a long table that was bent over, and it was filled with books and scrolls. Yiqing Luo's corner. They could only see a fairy-like woman in a long white dress sitting on one side of the long table. Whereas opposite the lady, Yiqing Luo could only see half a side face of the figure. The figure was tall and slender, beautiful and straight like jade. It was just a glance. Yiqing Luo was certain. That guy was Xian. Damn it. Xian was meeting girls behind her back. Should she rush in and catch the woman? Or should she squat outside and watch what kind of shady business they were doing behind her back? In Yiqing Luo's heart, it was as if 10,000 horses were galloping and roaring. That little princess is very willful. I'm sorry for disturbing you. The woman spoke in a gentle and graceful manner. Her eyes flickered, and her expression was full of tenderness and affection. Yiqing Luo's fingers tightened. He had the urge to strangle that woman. The man didn't even raise his head as if he didn't see the woman's flirtatious gaze. He lowered his head and searched through the books and scrolls on the table. His slender, jade-like fingers stirred the chaos on the table. It's fine. Two cold and indifferent words. But it made Qingji's eyes gush with joy, but she pretended to be reserved and tried to find a topic. I heard that the Lord kidnapped the young master of the Feng family and was rescued by someone. That little princess must be furious. Chapter 4896. The man who had been looking down at the book suddenly raised his eyes. Her black hair was as fine as flowing water and spread out like fine silk. Under the bright light of the night pearl, it rippled with a black luster. What did you say? The man's voice was deep, without much emotion. But Qingji's eyes were filled with joy. This was the first time he took the initiative to respond to her. Did this mean, was he interested in what he had to say? Qinggu suppressed the excitement in her heart and continued the topic. That little princess is very angry, she is now looking for someone in the underground palace. The previous sentence. The man said faintly. Qinggu thought for a moment, the young master of the Feng family? Why did he kidnap the Feng family? The man asked in a deep voice. Qinggu shook her head. Maybe because the Feng family is related to that? She looked down at the messy books and paintings on the table. Maybe his lord has found another way? She didn't know if it was an illusion. When she finished this sentence, the man's eyes seemed to sink a little. But when she looked carefully, the man's expression was still calm, without the slightest fluctuation of emotion. It was rare for a man to be interested in her topic. Although Qinggu felt strange, she didn't want to end the topic like this, so she continued, the Feng family is really capable. They actually found this place to save people, but it's easy to come in but difficult to get out. Not only can that person not save people, I'm afraid he will also die here. Look at how angry the little princess is. I'm afraid, when the two people are found, they will be dead. The man didn't say anything at this moment. Instead, he looked down lightly. His eyes were a little cold. His breath was inexplicably cold. Xianxia sensed that something was wrong. Her smiling eyes dimmed slightly. She seemed to be testing, but also seemed to be inadvertently asking, "You seem to care a lot about the Feng family?" The man didn't even lift his eyelids. He didn't mean to answer. "If you are really interested in the Feng family, I can also help you bring the young master of the Feng family and the person who came to save people here." Xianxia guessed the man's thoughts and suggested. As she spoke, she sized up the man's expression. The man lowered his head. His fine black hair covered half of his face. His expression was half hidden. He couldn't see it clearly. Xianxia was a little unfathomable. She looked at the handsome half of the man's face and said tentatively, "Little princess, you couldn't find them even after searching the entire underground palace. Perhaps they really are hiding here. As long as they enter this courtyard, I will be able to find them." For some unknown reason, Xianxia always felt that the man in front of her was like a god, noble and elegant. He had an inexplicable concern for the people of the Feng family. However, after probing, the man's expression did not change. Even when she took the initiative to mention that she was going to look for the young master of the Feng family, he calmly spat out two words, "No need." It was a gentle and slow, simple but not rude, rejection. It seemed that the matters of the Feng family had nothing to do with him. Xianxia lowered her beautiful eyes and suppressed the strange feeling in her heart. Maybe she thought too much? Xianxia was relieved. Her cherry lips evoked an elegant smile. She held a book in her hand, got up and walked towards the man. "Look at this, doesn't it look like what you are looking for?" Chapter 4897. She walked to the man's side. She placed the book in her hand in front of the man. Her long white dress fluttered and brushed against the man's purple robe. She leaned over slightly and lifted her wrist slightly, brushing past the man's ear and landed on the book. This distance would be very close. And this position would also pull the relationship between the two closer. Xianxia was confident. Take out this angle, the most beautiful side. Let this man's sight stop on her for a few more breaths. Outside the window, Yiqing Luo clenched her fists tightly and stared at Xianxia fiercely, getting closer and closer to the man's body. Especially when she saw Qingji's long veil brushing against the man's robe. She couldn't wait to rush in. The two separated. That Xianxia wanted to seduce her man? Wasn't it good to live well? What was she thinking about? And, Xian, that pig trotter. Why didn't he avoid it? Why did he let Xianxia get close to him? Did he still have any self-awareness as a married man? No way. She wanted to rush in. She wanted to tear that Xianxia who wanted to get close to her man into pieces. Ow ow ow. So angry, so angry. So angry that she wanted to roar like an evil dragon. Calm down, calm down. Old man Song's voice interrupted Yiqing Luo's inner drama. He coughed lightly and comforted her. "You must believe in the overlord, he is the man you like." "Of course I believe him." Yiqing Luo said this sentence without any hesitation. She had never said that she didn't believe in Dmo Xian. But believing in Dmo Xian didn't mean that she couldn't feel good. How could those wild chickens which came out of nowhere? How could they run around Dmo Xian? Since you believe in him, then you should believe that he will not have any ill intentions towards you. Old man Song could clearly feel Yiqing Luo's suppressed manic emotions. Yiqing Luo replied naturally, "Of course." She raised her chin and sneered in her heart. "That Xianxia, is she better looking than me? Smarter than me? Just a piece of trash." Old man Song listened to the young lady's sophistry. How could a piece of trash make her so angry? Was she really as calm as she looked on the surface? He didn't dare to say it, nor did he dare to ask. Yiqing Luo stared fixedly at the two people who were getting nearer and nearer. He almost rolled up his sleeves and climbed in through the window. At this moment, the man sat in front of the table with his head slightly lowered. It was as though he had sensed something. He turned his head and looked out of the window. His obsidian eyes were as deep as the sea. It was like a whirlpool that could cause one to fall into it with a single glance. Yiqing Luo leaned against the wall, taking big mouthfuls of air silently as she asked in her mind, "Did he see it? Did he see it? I dodged so quickly that he probably didn't see me, right?" Just now, at the critical moment, she jerked her head back. But she did not know. If Dmo Xian had captured her silhouette, she was very fast. But Dmo Xian's acuity was extraordinary. Even if he saw it, he would know it was you and would not come out to catch you. What's there to be afraid of? Old man Tsang did not understand what Yiqing Luo was panicking about. Yiqing Luo hugged her head. If Ah Xian knew that I was peeping at him, I would be so shameless. Old man Tsang. Inside the house. The man who was looking out of the window had a trace of mischievous smile in his eyes. Even his entire face seemed to have softened a little. Chapter 4898. Qinggu was preparing to approach the man quietly to carry out her plan. What entered her eyes was a smear of gentleness. Her heart felt as though it had been shot by an arrow, as a little deer was pounding around. Overlord. A flirtatious voice called out to the man softly. Qingji's body leaned forward slightly as she wanted to get closer. A swoosh sound was heard. Qingji's outstretched hand was blocked by a book. Tightly, the end of the book was slightly exerted. Qinggu was pushed 2 steps away from the man. That book was casually thrown aside from the man's hand. That kind of nonchalance. As though he was throwing away unnecessary rubbish. Overlord. Qingji's heart skipped a beat as her voice turned hoarse. Her delicate and gentle face revealed a tinge of coquettish grumbling. She hadn't finished her words. Her throat was choked by the man's icy cold gaze. Don't come near me. The man's voice was emotionless, so bland that it was almost cold. That kind of coldness and heartlessness, a direct and decisive rejection. Qingji's heart suddenly felt a little pain. But she still lowered her brows, lowering her attitude to the lowest. Yes, I've overstepped. When Yi Qinggu cautiously stuck her head out again looking into the window, Qinggu had already returned to her original seat. As for Dmo Xian, he was at his original position, not moving at all. He seemed to be very focused, lowering his head to look at the book in his fingers. From the looks of it, Dmo Xian should not have sensed her presence earlier, right? She had already dodged in time. If Dmo Xian saw it, based on his vigilance, he would definitely check it out. But Dmo Xian had no reaction at all. He should not have sensed it. Thinking of this, Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief. While she was relaxing, Yiqing Luo couldn't help but think. What was Dmo Xian trying to investigate in this base of secluded palace? This woman called Qinggu. What the hell was this? From Linglong's words earlier, she could tell. The people in secluded palace actually knew that there was an outsider man in Qingji's room. Presumably that sinister and cunning person behind the scenes in secluded palace knew about this. But why? Would he allow Dmo Xian to stay in secluded palace's base? The people behind the palace of gloomy darkness were not afraid. Had Dmo Xian really found something? He was deep in thought. Yiqing Luo suddenly raised her vigilant eyes and looked behind her. She heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Under the misty night sky, the light from the luminous pearl shining through the window flickered. A figure walked out of the darkness. Her red dress was completely different from her cold and indifferent temperament. But it had a different kind of tension and charm. Zhu Wuxin. How did he find his way here? Yiqing Luo frowned slightly as she shot him a warning stare. Zhu Wuxin's sleeve moved slightly, revealing a small figure. Xiao Tuanzi opened her eyes and looked around, her eyes filled with worry and anxiety. Yiqing Luo's brows creased even more tightly. Why, did Zhu Wuxin bring Fengxi here? She cautiously glanced through the window and saw that the man was still maintaining his original posture. The person in the house was Dmo Xian. That man was too sharp. There is some movement here. It was highly possible that Dmo Xian would sense it. She took quick steps forward and took Fengxi from Zhu Wuxin's arms. Fengxi immediately wrapped her arms tightly around her neck, as though she had been given a huge shock. Yiqing Luo took a look at the direction of the room and patted Fengxi's back lightly. Her gaze congealed slightly, as though it was covered with a layer of darkness. Chapter 4899. The young lady was quiet and her gaze was heavy. She looked at Zhu Wuxin for a long time before she slowly retracted her gaze. Then she hugged Fengxi tightly and turned to leave. Zhu Wuxin's icy cold lips curled upwards, revealing an unfathomable smile. There was Zhu Wuxin and Fengxi. If there was any movement between the two of them, it would be a piece of cake for the people in the room to find out. Although she was very unwilling to let the two of them be alone in the room. But now, for Fengxi and her safety, and because of Dmo Xian, she wasn't clear about the reason why Dmo Xian was in the base of the Palace of Darkness. But Dmo Xian must have his own motives. She couldn't disturb Dmo Xian. And she couldn't let the disciples of the Palace of Darkness disturb Dmo Xian. Overlord. Qingji's voice was as gentle as the wind. She stared at Dmo Xian's slender jade-like fingers that were holding onto a piece of paper. This page, is there a clue? He stared at the contents of the page. It had been a quarter of an hour. He didn't turn the page. He just stared at it in a daze. This made Jianghu, who had been paying attention to him, feel strange. Just as Jianghu shouted, "Lord Dizun," Dmo Xian's fingers tightened. The thin book paper was torn in half with a tearing sound. In the quiet study, the sound was extremely clear. "Overlord?" Jianghu was startled. Dmo Xian slammed the book on the table. The force was so great that the books on the table were blown away by the strong wind, which scattered all over the floor. There was no emotion on that peerless face. Between his brows was a bone-chilling coldness. It was as if it carried the force of a thunderbolt. A storm was brewing. "Overlord, what's the matter?" This was the first time Jianghu had seen such a powerful Dmo Xian. Her delicate body trembled slightly from the shock. Dmo Xian's dark eyes were fixed on the direction outside the window. The wind was blowing and there was no sound outside the window. That was the owner of the pair of eyes that was watching him. The aura had disappeared. And, at the moment when he disappeared, he could clearly feel it. The other was an aura that made people want to do evil. Yiqing Luo carried Feng Shi as she returned to Gu Jingyu's room. "Why are you awake?" Yiqing Luo rubbed Feng Shi's head, indicating that he could speak now. Feng Shi's face turned red as she hugged Yiqing Luo tightly. Cici thought that because Cici was too lazy and only knew how to sleep, Fairy Sister didn't want Cici anymore? The little person's voice was crisp and clear, and there was even some fear and panic in it. Yiqing Luo placed her by the bedside. "No matter, it's not entirely Cici's fault that Cici wants to sleep." She glanced meaningfully at Zhu Wuxin, her pink lips curling into a deep arc with unknown meaning. Just now, as soon as he entered this room, Chu Wuxin poured a cup of tea for Feng Shi. There was clearly something wrong with the tea. However, seeing that it was only a few hours of rest, he didn't think too much of it. Therefore, she didn't stop Feng Shi from drinking that cup of tea. It was normal for Feng Shi to feel sleepy and doze off after drinking that cup of tea. Chu Wuxin didn't have the slightest bit of embarrassment after being exposed. He was magnanimous and had no intention to explain. Instead, he asked Yiqing Luo, "Didn't I ask you not to wander around? Why did you run so far away? Isn't this what you hoped for?" Yiqing Luo tilted her head, her gaze was slightly cold as she looked at him indifferently. "You let Feng Shi fall into a deep sleep and took the opportunity to draw my attention when I was alone." Qing Ji's situation. Chapter 4900. Her voice paused slightly as she tilted her head and laughed. "Isn't it because you want me to see the scene where Xian and another lady interact alone?" Zhu Wuxian didn't say a word. The gaze which he shot towards Yiqing Luo was filled with an unknown deep meaning, as though he wanted to see her into his eyes. Silence. That represented a tacit agreement. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as she wasn't angry. "Unfortunately, I'll have to disappoint you. The scene which you want to see will not be staged." The young lady's tone was obviously filled with ridicule. When she tilted her head slightly, her long and narrow eyes squinted. Endless ridicule. "Do you know what I want to see?" In the darkness, the man's deep and chilly voice rang. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. "Do you need to ask me what you want to see next?" "I'm curious." Zhu Wuxin suddenly walked nearer to her as his footsteps were slightly heavy. "In your heart, how do you see me?" When he got nearer, and it was accompanied by a sky full of cold air, it made Feng Shi hide behind Yiqing Luo out of fear. Yiqing Luo hugged Feng Shi with one hand as she comforted his frightened heart while looking at him without any change in expression. "You don't want to know." "But I do." Zhu Wuxin got nearer as his chilly intent pounced on her. Yiqing Luo's eyes were gloomy as her long and narrow eyes were filled with a complicated glint. She pinched Feng Shi's hand lightly as she caressed it casually. She spoke calmly as her lips curled into a cold smile. "Do you want to hear the truth or a lie?" "A lie." Zhu Wuxian replied without any hesitation. Yiqing Luo, wishful thinking. A man who didn't play his cards according to the norm was really quick-witted. She shouldn't have asked a truth or a lie. Her face was solemn as she put on a serious look. "I'm a kind young lady, I only speak the truth." Following that, she shot him a cold glance as her voice was indifferent. "Actually, in my heart, I feel that you are rather annoying." Zhu Wuxian's expression remained unchanged, and Yiqing Luo didn't beat around the bush as she went straight to the point. "What you're thinking, isn't it to see a gap between Xian and me, making me misunderstand that Xian has betrayed me?" All sorts of schemes. In the end, it was just for her to see it with her own eyes. The man she loved, even when he knew that she was also in the god realm. However, he was still hiding in this place with another woman. A man and a woman alone together. As for the other woman, it was obvious that she liked him. If it was any other woman who saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked. He was afraid that he would lose his mind and lose his rationality. Thus, it affected the relationship between them. "Aren't you angry?" Zhu Wuxian neither admitted nor denied it. Instead, he asked another question. Yiqing Luo replied calmly, "I'm angry." She raised her eyebrows. "Of course I'm angry, but I'm not angry because he betrayed me, because I know that in this world, no one will love me more than Xian." Zhu Wuxin's brows furrowed tightly. His thin lips moved as if he wanted to refute. But in the end he stopped himself from saying anything. Yiqing Luo's pink lips curled up as her smile was tainted with some gentleness. "I believe that Xian will not betray me." "Ha!" Zhu Wuxin sneered in a low voice. The coldness in his eyes intensified. He stood in front of the young lady as he looked down at her from a high position. In the darkness, the outline of his grave and stern face was faintly discernible. That pair of serene eyes suddenly revealed an icy glint. "I indeed know that he's here." Zhu Wuxin's voice sounded abnormally deep. Chapter 49:01. I indeed want you to see with your own eyes how the person you love is surrounded by other women when you're not around. As for him, he would rather be with another woman than come and see you. Even when you were forcefully betrothed to that Feng Changqing by the acting god emperor, he didn't appear. Zhu Wuxian's words entered her ears clearly. Like a huge bell, it struck Yiqing Luo's ears. His thin lips curled into a sneer. If he really cared about you and valued you, he wouldn't have let you face that kind of situation alone. He should stand out and admit that he is the one you want to marry. Zhu Wuxian snorted, but he didn't. The one who stood out is me, the one who is willing to take responsibility for you is also me. He doesn't have the intention to spend the rest of his life with you, and he had never thought of appearing in front of your loved ones. Yiqing Luo, wake up, he doesn't love you at all. The more Zhu Wuxian spoke, the heavier his tone became. It almost pressured the air in the entire room, making one unable to breathe. Feng Shi's little hand clutched Yiqing Luo tightly, as her little body trembled slightly. Yiqing Luo frowned as she kept her in her arms, standing up slightly, blocking the man's icy cold aura. "Young Master Zhu, are you mistaken about something?" The young lady's voice was filled with extreme coldness. "What right do you have to judge my relationship with Xian? Whether he doesn't care about me or not, whether he values me or not, I have my own judgment. As for you, so what if you stood out at that time? To me your standing out made me feel very troublesome. Whether Xian wants to spend the rest of his life with me, that's a matter between Xian and I. Since I trust him, I will trust everything about him. And whether he loves me or not, it has nothing to do with you." The young lady's words were extremely indifferent, as though it was wrapped in ice. There wasn't any fluctuation of emotions. Like thousands of silver needles, piercing into Zhu Wuxian's heart. In his mind, every single word of the young lady's harsh words reverberated. I only like you, that's all." "Why?" Zhu Wuxian's gaze was heavy as he looked at the young girl's face. Bit by bit, he shifted his gaze to the way she was holding Feng Shi in her arms, looking absolutely protective. The sorrow in his eyes deepened. Even the words that came out of his mouth sounded very hoarse. "Why are you so cruel to me?" Yiqing Luo didn't avoid his line of sight. She looked into his deep, cold eyes. He enunciated each word clearly and resolutely. "I don't like you, so whatever you do, it's wrong." His words caused the entire room to fall into a deathly silence. After a long while, Zhu Wuxin laughed softly. His laughter was filled with bitterness and cold ridicule. "Because you love Dmo Xian? So no matter what he does, it's right? Right?" "Yes." Yiqing Luo replied decisively. "Ha!" Zhu Wuxian let out another cold laugh. His chest was concussed. Suddenly he stretched out his hand and locked Yiqing Luo's wrist. Yiqing Luo's brows creased as she struggled to break free. His strength was extremely great. When Feng Shi saw this, she immediately hugged Zhu Wuxian's hand, wanting him to let go of Yiqing Luo, let go of Fairy Sister. But Zhu Wuxian directly stretched out his hand and held Feng Shi in his arms as his body leaned forward tightly, forcing Yiqing Luo to take 2 steps back. Her legs bent and touched the foot of the bed behind her. Chapter 49:02. Yiqing Luo's brows creased slightly. "What do you want to do?" Zhu Wuxian locked her wrist with one hand. In the darkness, That faintly discernible grave and stern face was filled with endless coldness. The pair of eyes which blended in with the night, like a whirlpool, as though it was going to suck in everything around it. Yiqing Luo's pupils contracted slightly. She had a bad premonition in her heart. Zhu Wuxian's thin lips curled up. A deep and malicious voice rang beside the young lady's ear. You trust him so much, but will he believe you? Yiqing Luo realized what Zhu Wuxian wanted to do. Her expression suddenly sunk. Zhu Wuxian. Yiqing Luo bit his name heavily as her eyes seemed to be plated with a layer of frost. The young lady was furious. Her wrist, which was locked tightly by Zhu Wuxian, suddenly turned in a strange position. She withdrew her hand from Zhu Wuxian's grip. Immediately after, Yiqing Luo stretched out her arm towards Zhu Wuxian, trying to snatch Fengxi away from his arms. But the moment she stretched out her hand, it was as though the man had seen through her actions. Yiqing Luo had just stretched out her hand, but it was intercepted by Zhu Wuxian halfway. Her fair hand was once again held by the man's broad palm. But this scene seemed as though Yiqing Luo had taken the initiative to send herself into the man's hand. And right at this moment, a bam sound was heard. The tightly shut room door was suddenly pushed open. The ground suddenly began to shake. Even the things in the room started to sway. From outside the open door, it faintly projected the glow of the luminous pearl. In the room, the two people whose murderous intent was soaring were stunned for a moment by this sudden change. In the air there was a ripple of an icy mountain's aura, as though it could freeze the surroundings into frost. The gloomy atmosphere was oppressive. The air was filled with a faint, chilly sandalwood fragrance. Yiqing Luo's pupils suddenly contracted. Xian? Hearing the young lady's soft cry, the whirlpools at the bottom of Zhu Wuxian's eyes surged more and more like surging waves. He was like a beast that had been trapped for a long time and was about to be freed. At this moment, the cold smile on his thin lips was filled with evil and malice. He grabbed the girl's wrist and bent down to, "Come closer, girl." Zhu Wuxian. The refreshing fragrance of plums assaulted his nostrils. Yiqing Luo recovered from the earlier shock. She pushed Zhu Wuxian's hand away with her other hand, her fingertips moving slightly. A fiery red fan appeared between her slender, white fingers. A sharp blade came out from the handle of the fan and pierced into the man's chest. The fresh blood was not conspicuous among the red clothes. Zhu Wuxian snorted. He lowered his eyes and looked at his chest. The sharp blade stung his eyes. He chuckled softly, and the emotions in his eyes surged even more intensely. It was tight and firm, completely ignoring the sharp blade in his chest. He wrapped an arm around the girl's shoulder. He moved closer to the girl. The sharp blade pierced deeper into his chest. But he didn't care. Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyelashes trembled slightly. Very quickly, her eyes were left with a piece of ice which was like a 1,000-year-old snow mountain, cold to the bone. The moment the man's arm wrapped around her, with a backhand she locked onto his arm. It was tight and her body was pushed out of his arm's range. She had just moved. A hand was placed on her waist. The force was extremely strong. The overbearing aura invaded her senses. Bam! A heavy object landed on the ground, reverberating through the house. Chapter 4903. That red robe fell heavily onto the ground. For a long time she didn't get up. But no one was paying attention to that side. When the strength around his waist and the scent of sandalwood lingered around his body, he felt a chill run down his spine. In Yiqing Luo's eyes, all that was left was the face that was so close to her, like a god, noble and elegant. Xian. Yiqing Luo called out softly. The man's eyes were as deep as ink, reflecting the young girl's charming and beautiful face. The moment their eyes met, it was as though there were only the two of them left in the world. Until, Overlord you. A lady's gentle voice was heard from the side, breaking the tenderness in the room. Yiqing Luo looked sideways towards the open door. She saw a lady dressed in white walking over. The chilly wind blew over. The lady's skirt was rolled up, like a blooming white lotus, pure and noble. It was that woman called Jianghu. The scene was a little unbelievable. Nestled in Dmo Xian's arms. Yiqing Luo was still in the mood to imagine a drama in her mind. Was this considered husband and cheating partner, caught on the spot? Her and Zhu Wuxian this cheating partner? It seemed their relationship was a little complicated. Above her head, Dmo Xian's hoarse voice floated down. What are you thinking about? He didn't even look at Jianghu from the corner of his eyes. His gaze was focused on Yiqing Luo, and he could clearly see the various weird expressions on the young lady's face. Just a glance. He knew that his young lady was daydreaming again. Yiqing Luo seemed as though she was caught red-handed as her cheeks flushed red and coughed violently. Nothing? Nothing. Diamo Xian scoffed lightly as his slender fingers pinched her face. Don't let your imagination run wild. Then have you ever let your imagination run wild? Yiqing Luo's narrow eyes curved as her eyes were filled with craftiness and ridicule. There was no ill feeling between the two of them. It made the man in red who was lying on the ground stand up shakily. Blood was gushing out from his chest. The corners of her lips were also bright red. But he was still smiling. The curve of his thin lips was clear and cold. That smile was startling to see. The scene in front of him was so warm that it could not contain anyone. It was as if it was mocking him, everything he had done. It was all just a joke. He couldn't interfere at all. Obviously he already knew about this matter. But his heart would still hurt. Zhu Wuxin lowered his gaze and stared at the spot on his chest where blood was seeping out. The feeling of the blade stabbing into his chest still lingered in his body. But the pain here. It was not even half a beat away from the heart. Perhaps it was because his gaze was too deep. Chapter 4904. Her expression was somewhat complicated. Her long and narrow cat eyes slightly turned sideways, as it congealed towards Zhu Wuxian's direction. Looking at Zhu Wuxian, who lowered his head and stared at her chest, his thin lips curled upwards, as though he was smiling yet not smiling. Yiqing Luo pursed her lower lips slightly. Before she could open her mouth, the strength around her waist suddenly tightened. The man's deep and hoarse voice floated down from above. So Pavilion Lord has the hobby of snatching someone else's wife. That voice sounded very calm. But Yiqing Luo could still hear the deep chilliness in it. Like a sharp blade, it pierced towards Zhu Wuxian's body. Zhu Wuxian raised his eyes slightly, as his icy cold eyes met Diamo Xian's gaze. That smile, which didn't look like a smile, was still hanging by the side of his lips. As though he was provoking Diamo Xian, he spoke indifferently. Snatch someone else's wife? She doesn't seem to be your wife. He laughed coldly. You're not engaged, so why can't I be pleased with her? Diamo Xian's gaze was like a gathering cold wind as it swirled up a whirlwind. Just as Yiqing Luo felt the chill as she raised her eyes to look at Diamo Xian. The man's emotions had already returned to normal. He didn't look angry and even curled his lips. His rosy red thin lips, the curve was noble with some undetectable complacency. I'm afraid Pavilion Lord has forgotten little Luo, or can only accept that the person standing beside her is me. The man's tone sounded very casual. But it made Zhu Wuxian's smile, which was filled with provocation and sarcasm, freeze on his face. Diamo Xian was very satisfied that his own words had caused a huge reaction to Zhu Wuxian. The smile on his lips deepened. The casual expression on his brows also seeped out a few hints of provocation. Of course I don't mind, there are people who are pleased with little Luo, because this means that this lord's foresight is indeed very good. This lord's little Luo, is very popular. Every word, every sentence was showing his sovereignty. Zhu Wuxian's expression was getting uglier and uglier. But at this moment Diamo Xian gave a cold and sarcastic smile. But Pavilion Lord's heart makes my little Luo, very troubled. Pavilion Head's heart is troubling my little Luo. Pavilion Head's heart is troubling my little Luo. This sentence kept lingering in his mind. It was as if the replay button had been pressed. Zhu Wuxian's dark eyes were like raging waves. His hands that were hanging by his side slowly clenched into fists. His fingertips turned white. Her cold face exuded an eerie coldness. His fondness, just to make Yiqing Luo so annoyed? Especially when these words were said by Diamo Xian. Zhu Wuxin snorted lightly. Her cold face was filled with pain. He looked straight at Yiqing Luo as he asked word by word, do you also feel the same way? The man's body was obviously a little unstable. Blood could be faintly seen seeping out of his fingertips that were covering his chest. Her red clothes were a little messy. From the looks of it, he was in an exceptionally sorry state. His gaze was abnormally scorching, as though it was going to burn her. Yiqing Luo met his gaze as her brows creased slightly towards this question of his. To tell the truth, if she wanted to answer, it would be a little complicated. She deliberated over her words in her mind. Perhaps it was because she took too long to think. That arm which was placed across her waist suddenly increased its strength. It was slightly tight around her waist. Chapter 4905. As though he was warning her, answer properly. Death question. Death stare. Yiqing Luo. So how should she answer in order to satisfy this master? Was Diamo Xian called? Smiling on the outside but cursing in his heart? On the surface, he looked extremely confident and complacent, totally unconcerned about Zhu Wuxian's thoughts towards her. In reality, in her heart, she hated Zhu Wuxian's thoughts towards her deeply. Yiqing Luo secretly raised her hand and pinched his arm. You don't believe me? This kind of warning action must be condemned. Diamo Xian's inky eyes congealed deeply on the young lady's face. Of course I believe you, I know. The person Lil Luo loves the most is me. You know, and you still strangled me? Yiqing Luo pinched his arm again. Strangling me means that you don't believe me. Diamo Xian's brows were filled with a smile. So you admit that the person you love the most is indeed me? No. Yiqing Luo replied decisively, the person I love the most is myself. The person I love the most is you, that's enough. Diamo Xian lowered his head slightly, as his chin rested on the young lady's shoulder. Yiqing Luo's little hand pinched the back of his hand from time to time. The man's joints were clearly defined, his fair jade-like fingers felt extremely good to touch. She let out a light snort. The man suddenly held her little hand as his deep magnetic voice was mellow like fine wine. I'm because I care about you, so I'm not confident in myself. My fault. Don't be angry, The last, at the end of the tone was raised, low and lazy. Like a little hook, it tugged at Yiqing Luo's heartstrings bit by bit. Bam. In front, a sound of a heavy object colliding was heard. It dispersed the warmth in the room. Yiqing Luo's vision had just turned over. She saw the figure who had knocked against the door, but was still swaying as he turned around to leave. That figure gave off a lonely and bitter feeling as if he was fleeing for his life. Yiqing Luo's pink lips moved as she wanted to call out to Zhu Wuxian. But the words that were about to come out, she swallowed it back. What was the use of calling him? For people like Zhu Wuxian, to a person who was so paranoid that he was speechless. Since he couldn't give any response. Or, use indifference to reject. She could see that too. Those actions and words that Diamo Xian had said earlier, were all completely different. It was all to make Zhu Wuxian give up. However, looking at Zhu Wuxian's swaying figure, which looked like it would fall at any moment even when he walked, and the blood dripping on the ground, Yiqing Luo's pink lips pursed even tighter. More or less he couldn't bear to do it. Before he could speak. Beside his ears the man's faint voice floated down. Xiaojiu, follow him, don't let him die. A ball of white light suddenly shot toward Zhu Wuxian. Chapter 4906. She knew. The reason why Diamo Xian asked Little Nine to take care of Zhu Wuxian. To her. Zhu Wuxian's obsession and stubbornness made her troubled and she could only face it coldly. But, towards Zhu Wuxian, she didn't hate him. After all, every love deserved to be respected. Even if she didn't like Zhu Wuxian. But not because of Zhu Wuxian's feelings for her. And disregarding all the things that Zhu Wuxian had done for her. After all, he had saved her several times. If she were to watch him leave with an injury and not care about anything, wasn't that too cold? In her heart, Zhu Wuxian was actually considered as a friend. If he didn't have that obsession towards her, perhaps they were already friends. But, even if she was worried about him, she couldn't let her own battle pet take care of Zhu Wuxian and send him out of the Palace of Darkness base. She made a move. She would definitely give Zhu Wuxian hope. Then all the coldness that she had done previously would be wasted. Diamo Xian apparently thought of this point. This man, he had always put his life on the line to think for her. Overlord she, who is she? A sharp voice broke the warmth between the both of them. Dressed in a fluttering white robe, the woman with a delicate and elegant face strode towards them. Yiqing Luo's heels landed on the ground as she glanced sideways at Qinggu, who looked as though she was trying to kill her way over as her pink lips curled upwards. Zhu Wuxian had left. Now another Qinggu had come. She and her Xian hadn't met each other for a long time. She didn't even have the chance to be alone with him. Furthermore, her Xian was hers. This lady, on what basis did she have to question her identity in this manner? Just as Qinggu walked over, Yiqing Luo had already stretched out her hand and pulled Diamo Xian behind her. Her petite and slender figure stood in front of Diamo Xian and also blocked Qingji's path. Her pink lips rose slightly as she tilted her head slightly and looked at her with a smile which didn't look like a smile. Miss Qinggu has been looking for so long, don't you know my identity? That smile was enchanting. Like a dazzling mandala blossoming. Her long and narrow eyes curved into a smile. Qingji's eyes widened as she said in a dull tone, "I'm sorry, the martial monarch never mentioned to me that there's another woman beside him." As she spoke, her cherry lips curled up into an elegant and distant smile. It sounded as though he was explaining the reason why he didn't know Yiqing Luo. But every word and sentence was hinting at, if the man didn't mention his other half, it meant that the man didn't care about her at all and didn't acknowledge her identity at all. The last few words were, another woman. As though hinting at Yiqing Luo. Even if she really had an intimate relationship with Diamo Xian, she was just one of them. Yiqing Luo naturally understood the deep meaning behind the pigeon's words. Instead of getting angry, she smiled. Her eyes curved and she smiled. "Ah Xian, you don't have to mention my identity to unimportant people." She lifted her eyes and looked at the man's handsome face. When she met the man's ink-like eyes, the dimples in her eyes bloomed. Following that, she stretched out her hand and circled around the man's neck. She buried herself into the man's broad embrace. Her face was plastered on the man's chest. Her vision was directed towards Qinggu. Yiqing Luo laughed lightly, "Miss Qinggu, am I right?" Chapter 4907. The young lady's words were filled with provocation. That long and narrow eyes were also filled with provocation. How could Qinggu not hear it and not understand it? And she could hear it and understand it. How could Diamo Xian not understand it? But Diamo Xian lowered his eyes and stared at the young lady in front of him, like a cat protecting its food, stretching out its sharp claws to block him. That bright and flamboyant, absolutely stunning face. It was deeply reflected in his eyes. The young lady's actions had deeply pleased Diamo Xian. The man's eyes were filled with tenderness and tenderness. His entire person seemed much gentler. Qingji's line of sight was fixed on Diamo Xian, looking at the man's obvious joyful expression. Suddenly she felt a dull pain in her heart. She could tell how much the overlord valued the young lady in his arms. That pampering and gentle look. This was the first time she saw such an expression on the overlord. No, more accurately. As long as the overlord's line of sight fell on the young lady, his entire person was soft. But the moment his line of sight shifted, he would become the overlord of the past, all of his transformations. Just because of that young lady named Yiqing Luo. Her heart was extremely unwilling, so jealous that she wanted to explode. "I'm sorry, I don't really like my man being stared at by other women for too long." That young lady in red flame moved her body, blocking Qingji's line of sight. After Yiqing Luo stood still, her pink lips rose slightly, her enchanting face revealed a hint of cold provocation. "I'm different from Ah Xian, I am." Her lips curled up, smiling coldly, "I am too possessive, I can't allow anyone to taint my man." She paused, her gaze turned sharp. Her half-squinted eyes reflected a cold glint, as she stared coldly at Qinggu. Word by word, she spat out the last half of the sentence, including "in my heart, tainting." The young lady's overbearing and arrogant attitude. Extremely flamboyant. It was a declaration of its sovereignty. Qingji's exquisite and beautiful face twisted slightly. But very quickly it returned to normal. Continuing to maintain her elegance and gentleness, she ignored Yiqing Luo and instead looked towards Diamo Xian. The woman's voice was soft and gentle. "Your Majesty, that man just now has met Master before. If he tells Master that you are here, I won't." Diamo Xian's voice was indifferent. "Even if there is, this lord doesn't mind to dig it out from the dark corners." Other than reminding Diamo Xian, Qing Ying's words there was another deeper meaning. Firstly, it reminded Diamo Xian. The current Yiqing Luo and Zhu Wuxian had an ambiguous relationship. Secondly, Yiqing Luo and Zhu Wuxian's entanglement was unclear, which led to him being discovered by Zhu Wuxian. Thirdly, it was because Yiqing Luo believed in Zhu Wuxian and gave him a way out, which gave Zhu Wuxian the chance to complain to his lord. But, no matter what the reason was, Diamo Xian had already rejected it without hesitation. Diamo Xian's eyelids didn't even bother to look at her, and that deeply hurt Qingji's eyes. "We haven't found any leads on Kuku." Qinggu was rejected once and felt a little frustrated, so she could only bring out the topic which Diamo Xian was most interested in an attempt to attract his attention. "Qinggu." The man suddenly opened his mouth as his voice was cold and emotionless as he called out her name. Chapter 4908. Qingji's eyes lit up as she looked at Diamo Xian shyly and joyfully. "Overlord." You can go back now. The man's next sentence sent Qinggu straight to hell from heaven. Qingji's face turned slightly pale as her voice quivered. Overlord, we don't have much time. I want to spend some time alone with Lil Luo. The man's indifferent voice cut off Qingji's words. He wrapped his arm around the young lady's slender waist as he looked down at the person in his arms. At this moment, even his voice had turned gentle. I miss her. I miss her. These 3 words were like a hammer, pounding heavily on Qingji's heart. Qingji's face turned as white as a sheet. Her slender fingers clenched tightly as her eyes looked miserable, delicate and pitiful. Immediately, she looked at Diamo Xian with an aggrieved look. She turned around and jogged out of the room. Her jogging speed was slightly slow, as though she was waiting for the man to stop her. But it was impossible to stop her. Not even in this lifetime would he be able to stop her. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved in satisfaction as she stretched out her hand and touched Diamo Xian's head. Her slender, fair fingers caressed his silky black hair. Then she released his hair in satisfaction as her fingertips moved downwards and hooked his chin. Be good, I'll reward you. Following the young lady's words, her fingers that were holding the man's chin suddenly exerted force. Her eyebrows were tinged with a hint of a joyful smile. If it was any other time, based on Diamo Xian's character, he would definitely scold Qinggu to leave. And he wouldn't explain anything. Things like, I want to spend some time alone with Lil Luo, I miss her, and so on. These were all purposely said for Qinggu to hear. This kind of self-conscious action to cut off any thoughts of the opposite sex. It was simply too heartwarming. Especially women who were totally irresistible. In front of the opposite sex who had improper thoughts. Proactively showing affection. Using his actions to prove that he was a married man. Conscious enough. No wonder he was her family's Xianxia. The light bulb had run away. What the hell? The entire room was left with Yiqing Luo and Diamo Xian. A little dumpling who was sitting on the ground, staring at Diamo Xian in a daze. When he saw the 2 of them hugging each other and asking for a reward, Xiao Tuanzi had a feeling that her fairy was about to be snatched away. In the process of the young lady rewarding Diamo Xian, he suddenly pounced onto Yiqing Luo's legs. His small body forcefully squeezed between the 2 of them. She had a small face carved out of jade, with distinct black and white, round and lively big eyes. She was very cute. Diamo Xian lowered his head and looked at the little dumpling who was pushing him with all her might. A few rays of light flashed across his obsidian-like eyes. He bent down and picked up the little dumpling. Xiao Tuanzi was so frightened that she immediately grabbed hold of Diamo Xian's collar. His shimmering purple robe was messed up by the scratches. He was not angry. He just used his hand to pinch Xiao Tuanzi's face. His brows rose as he looked at Yiqing Luo. When did you give birth to such a big child behind my back? Yiqing Luo, have a child? What do you mean by giving birth? How long had they been apart? Just a few months? I'm just teasing you. Seeing the young lady staring at him in shock, Diamo Xian couldn't help but let out a light laugh. Chapter 4909. With his other hand, he pulled her into his embrace. Your little cousin looks a lot like you. Feng Shi and Feng Liqiong looked very similar. Feng Liqiong and Feng Gu looked very similar. Naturally. Feng Shi and Yiqing Luo looked very similar. If it wasn't for the fact that Feng Shi and Yiqing Luo's age didn't match up, they really had the feeling of mother and son. Especially, just now, the moment they pushed the door open. Chu Wu Xian held Feng Shi in one arm as his eyes met Yiqing Luo's. Just for a moment. It gave one a kind of, the feeling of a family of 3. Diamo Xian's eyes sunk slightly. He lowered his eyelids as he gazed at the person in his arms. Then he lifted Feng Shi up a little. A family of 3? His kind was a family of 3, alright? Diamo Xian's complicated inner thoughts. Yiqing Luo didn't sense it. Her attention was focused on another point. The young lady lifted her head in his arms as her narrow eyes widened and stared at Diamo Xian. You know he's my cousin? You really knew that I'm in the Feng family in the God realm, right? Diamo Xian remained silent for a moment as he spat out a word. You're in the God realm and you know where I am, why didn't you look for me? Yiqing Luo tugged his ear as she grumbled fiercely. Do you know that the main reason why I agreed to the reunion banquet is? I know. The man's large palm held the young lady's fair hand. A low and gentle voice interrupted Yiqing Luo's words. I know, you want to use the reunion banquet to tell me where you are. Yiqing Luo struggled against his hand as she snorted. Since you know, why didn't you come? Not only did you not come, You're even hiding here secretly with that beautiful Miss Jianghu, a lone man and a lone woman lovey-dovey? Tell me the truth, are you up to something behind my back? The young lady's fair fingers poked his chest fiercely. Dmo Xian's unique daintiness was displayed. In front of outsiders the young girl was ostentatious and bright, but in front of him she was like a cunning cat, smart and cute. This made Dmo Xian's eyes to be filled with a faint smile. His beautiful thin lips were frivolous, and his low and mellow voice entered her ears leisurely, because I know that you are safe in the Feng family. Safe my ass. That little uncle of mine has set his sights on me. Yiqing Luo didn't believe that he didn't know what had happened between her and Feng Liqiong when she was in the Feng family. Because my little Luo is very smart. The man caught her little hand that was poking around. Most importantly, I believe that little uncle of yours won't really bear to hurt you. Yiqing Luo's brows rose. How much do you know? Dmo Xian smiled without saying a word. As soon as he put on this pose, he did not intend to answer her question. Chapter 49:10. Yiqing Luo expressed that she was absolutely not a superficial woman who only knew how to look at appearances. She tried hard to adjust the expression on her face as she stared at Dmo Xian with a straight face and started to make trouble out of nothing. Anyway, it's your fault that you didn't look for me at the first instance after you knew I was in the god realm. See that? She was so overbearing and domineering. She would never succumb to Dmo Xian's honey trap. That little lady's demeanor fell into Dmo Xian's eyes. Just like a kitten acting coquettishly. It tickled his heart. Dmo Xian's eyes were filled with warmth and tenderness. His mellow voice was extremely pampering. Yes, it's my fault, there won't be a next time. Yiqing Luo? No way. This guy was too good at flirting. Her man was too handsome. What should she do when she was charmed by his honey trap every day? The reason why I'm here actually has something to do with you. Dmo Xian carried Feng Shi and placed her on the bed. Then he held Yiqing Luo and walked towards the outer hall. Yiqing Luo pushed away the hand around her waist. Cici will be afraid to stay here alone. Afraid? Dmo Xian narrowed his eyes and stared at Feng Shi. Will a man be afraid? Feng Shi's little head shrank. She felt that his gaze was a little cold. Just as she was about to stretch out her hands to Yiqing Luo, she heard the second half of the man's sentence. A man? He was a man. How could he not be a man in front of his fairy sister? Immediately he changed his words. No, I'm not afraid. Cici? Yiqing Luo swatted away Dmo Xian's hand and walked to the bed, bending over to touch his head. Don't listen to his nonsense, I'm here to accompany you. Cici is really not afraid. Feng Shi's little face was firm. Cici is a man, I'm not afraid to sleep alone. Saying that, the little girl obediently pulled the quilt over, lay down, covered herself and closed her eyes. Her obedient look was very cute. All right. Behind her, the man's long arms scooped the young girl into his arms. We'll be in the outer hall, we'll be able to hear anything. Dmo Xian did not allow for any explanation as he brought the young lady to the outer hall. Without Feng Shi, the third wheel, the atmosphere between the two of them was much more intimate. Yiqing Luo sat on the mahogany chair as she grabbed the man's finger and played with it. Earlier you said the reason why you're in the palace of seclusion is because of me. What do you mean by that? The man's ink-like eyes reflected the girl's enchanting face after the disguise. That pair of familiar charming eyes seemed to be able to reflect into his heart. His eyes were filled with love. When Sheng replied, the power of the palace of gloomy darkness is too complicated. If we want to eradicate it, we have to find the mastermind. But the mastermind is too cunning. It won't be easy to catch him. That's why I've always been thinking about why the person behind the scenes of Tenebrous Palace established such a force like Tenebrous Palace. What's their purpose? You seem to be the target of the Palace of Darkness. So, I'm guessing that if we find out, what exactly does the Palace of Darkness need you to achieve the goal of the Palace of Darkness, we can solve the root of the problem. Yiqing Luo went into deep thoughts when she heard the man's words. She had always been curious about the person behind the scenes of the Palace of Darkness. Even Xian if he wanted to get rid of the other party? Just what kind of existence was that person? Perhaps the only way was to find out clearly the motive of the Palace of Darkness. Then there would be a chance to find out the mastermind behind the Palace of Darkness. Chapter 49:11. Yiqing Luo regained her senses from her deep thoughts as she glanced sideways at Dmo Xian. Her little face was still pretending to pout coquettishly. Then, what has this got to do with you and that woman hiding here quietly? Dmo Xian laughed lightly. Initially, when I wanted to send the azure aqua threads back to you, I received news from the Imperial Palace that I've been investigating. His slender fingers gently touched the little face of the girl who was pretending to be angry. So, I went temporarily. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand. You found out the motive of the mastermind behind the secluded palace? From what he had said before, Yiqing Luo deduced it. And Diamo Xian nodded. Moreover, that motive is related to you. He leaned over slightly. His deep, inky pupils were fixated on Yiqing Luo without blinking. His eyes were very solemn. Under the night sky, it shone with a cold light. The people behind the gloomy palace are looking for a place. It's said that as long as we find that place, we'll be able to obtain the treasures within. Yiqing Luo. Why did this rumor sound so fake? It felt like some kind of scam organization was spreading unhealthy thoughts here. We want to build a harmonious society, to be a prosperous, strong, democratic, civilized people. This kind of baseless rumor could not be believed. Diamo Xian looked at the young lady's rich expression and couldn't help but curl his thin lips. He continued, there's still the second half. Yiqing Luo tried to probe, the one who gets the treasure, gets the world? Diamo Xian didn't expect Yiqing Luo to know about it. He remained silent for a moment and nodded. Yiqing Luo? He. The world I'm talking about here doesn't just refer to the God realm. Diamo Xian pondered for a moment as his eyes darkened. If we were to let all the big realms in this world merge back together, the world will definitely be in chaos. Do you believe that there's such a treasure? Yiqing Luo suddenly asked. Diamo Xian replied without any hesitation. I don't believe you. I don't believe it either. Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes. There are at least 20 to 30 realms in the world, if not 10. Even if you have the ability, you don't have the life to control it. Everything in the world had a balanced law of survival. If all the realms were to be united, how should the people of the major universes, big or small, with different abilities, levels, habits, and priorities, be controlled? Eventually there would be chaos. But the mastermind behind the Nether Palace believed it. Diamo Xian's eyes deepened. Moreover, this treasure indeed exists. Exist? Yiqing Luo's brows rose. You set up this base in the Palace of Secluded Darkness, just to investigate the location of that treasure? Diamo Xian's eyes softened even more, his eyes filled with smiles. His girl was really smart. It was only a few words. He had already guessed the gist of it. He held the young girl's fair and delicate hand. Even if this treasure can't take over the entire world, it shouldn't be a problem to take over the entire God realm. Once the mastermind behind the Palace of Gloomy Darkness takes over the God realm, it won't be long before the destruction of the other realms. Yiqing Luo's vision had not been focused at all as it was fixated on their hands which were interlocked. Looking at the intertwined fingers of the two of them, she muttered to herself for some time. When she opened her mouth again, the expression on her face had already changed into a solemn and serious one. The place which the mastermind is looking for. Don't tell me. Has something to do with me? Chapter 49:12. Ever since Nirvana Realm, Palace of Darkness had been finding trouble with me, trying to control me. The person behind the scenes needs me to find that place, right? In Yiqing Luo's mind, she rearranged all the connections. Her thoughts became clearer and clearer. Palace of Darkness's mastermind's motive, is it related to my mother, the Emperor of God Emperors? When this guess was set out, Diamo Xian's smile deepened. He hooked the young lady's fair fingers lightly, his voice was clear. Lil Luo, is so smart. His words indirectly admitted that everything she had guessed was true. Yiqing Luo's long lashes drooped slightly, her eyes were a little faint. So, what you said, the place that Palace of Darkness is looking for is my mother's. Which is also the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb, right? The Emperor of God Emperor's tomb. The place where the Emperor of God Emperors had passed away. That was where the treasures were buried. Any one of them was enough to stir up the various realms. It indeed could be called as a treasure. After all, the former Emperor of God Emperor's power, and whatever they had when they were alive, they were all God relics. If one were to talk about the real motive of Palace of Darkness mastermind, it was to find the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb, to obtain the Emperor of God Emperor's belongings. Everything that had happened before could be explained. No wonder. Over at Palace of Darkness she would always be able to see that stone wall which had her mother's totem carved on it. Every time she touched those stone walls, she would always fall into the periphery of the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb. This was all Palace of Darkness conspiracy. Those stone walls must be the mastermind behind Palace of Darkness, based on the information that she knew about the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb, to research a path to the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb, and at the same time to test if she really had the qualification to enter the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb. No wonder. When Palace of Darkness tried to deal with her several times, most of the time their motive was to control her, not to kill her. It was because only she could open the Emperor of God Emperor's tomb. Actually, in other words, it was rumored that the Feng family had treasures. This sentence was not fake, because the so-called precious treasure. She was the one who knew about the Divine Emperor's grave and entered it. Mysterious flame. W diagram. It was a map of the Divine Emperor's tomb. What the mastermind of Gloomy Palace wanted was the Mystic Flame's W diagram. What Feng Liqiong wanted, the so-called treasure of the Feng family, was probably the Xianxia W diagram. Apart from the map, there's also the method to enter the tomb of the Divine Emperor. It's also extremely complicated. Even that person from the Palace of Gloomy Darkness doesn't have a clue. Dmo Xian didn't refute Yiqing Luo's guess as he gently embraced her in his arms, but I'm guessing that the biggest key should still be you. After thinking through all these things, Yiqing Luo's feelings were rather complicated. Her head was pressed against the man's chest, feeling the warmth from his body. His cold body and uneasy heart gradually calmed down. Did you stay in the base of the Palace of Gloomy Shadows with Qinggu to investigate how to enter the tomb of the Divine Emperor? No wonder when she peeped outside Qingji's room, that study room was filled with various books and scrolls of ancient books. She shut her eyes as she buried her entire body into his warm embrace. By his side, there was a sense of security which made her rely on him. Chapter 49:13. For the Palace of Darkness to kidnap Cece at this juncture, is it because the mastermind behind the Palace of Darkness has found a way to enter the Divine Emperor's tomb? Other than me, there's also Cece. Can she replace me to enter the Divine Emperor's tomb? Dmo Xian gently stroked her hair with his fingertips. Feng, she is a descendant of the Feng family. Whether she has the qualification to enter the Divine Emperor's tomb, or whether she has any secrets about the Divine Emperor's tomb, the people behind the scenes of the Dark Nether Palace are not sure. I think the mastermind behind the Palace of Darkness is just trying. His soothing voice was gentle and mellow, which could easily soothe all the uneasiness in her heart. I will send you and Feng Shi out of here. As long as you don't leave the Feng family's territory, the Palace of Darkness will not dare to lay a hand on Feng Shi. What about you? Yiqing Luo's little hand grabbed his collar as she raised her head slightly. Do you still want to stay here? I will look for you after I find the clues. Dmo Xian patted her head. Yiqing Luo's little hand tightened. No, I don't want to. She couldn't always hide in the safe zone. She had to let Dmo Xian overcome all the obstacles for her. I'm with you not because I want you to do anything for me but because I want to be with you. Yiqing Luo's voice was a little hoarse, her long and narrow eyes were stained with a few sparkles. I said before, I want to grow too. To stand by your side, shoulder to shoulder with you. The purpose of my coming to the upper realm is to find out my background, to know why my biological parents would abandon me. Now I have found it. The Palace of Darkness's target is me, my mother. I can't keep hiding under your wings like this. Other than me, no one can really solve this matter. Following the young lady's determined voice, the light in her eyes became brighter and brighter. It was as if his eyes were filled with a sky full of stars. Unwavering. She looked at Dmo Xian fixedly. Their eyes met. The young lady's eyes rippled slightly, her pink lips curled into a brilliant smile. Ah Xian, I want to be with you. Little Luo, Dmo Xian sighed softly. His inky black eyes reflected her charming and enchanting face after her disguise. But under Dmo Xian's gaze, Yiqing Luo felt that. It was as if he could see through the disguise on her face and see the real her. I can't do anything to you. The man chuckled and hugged her even more tightly. There was a rare gentleness in his voice. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with smiles, like a cat who had gotten her way, her charming eyes curved. Because I was born to be your nemesis, my dear overlord. The man did not speak again. However, the doting look in his eyes and the gentleness in his actions represented all the answers. She would not leave his side. But how could he bear to part with her? Therefore, let's keep him by our side. Under his watch he could be more at ease. Hence, when Dmo Xian pulled Yiqing Luo back to Qingji's room, Qingji's expression, It was extremely complicated. The expression she shot towards Yiqing Luo was the most obvious: jealousy and hatred between ladies. Meeting Qing Ji's gaze. Yiqing Luo's pink lips curled up as she smiled sweetly at Qing Gu. "My Xian has been troubling you for so many days, I'm really sorry." Chapter 49:14. Qing Ji's expression darkened slightly. She didn't respond to Yiqing Luo but turned her gaze towards Dmo Xian. "Overlord, are you planning to leave?" Qing Ji's tone was carefully probing. She was afraid that Dmo Xian would really follow Yiqing Luo, intending to leave the secluded palace. She had yet to attract Dmo Xian's attention. He hadn't gotten the respected Dizun yet. She had allowed another woman to take him away from her hands just like that. Wouldn't she lose all her face? If this matter were to spread, where was her charm as a pure pigeon? Thinking of this, the coldness in Qing Ji's eyes intensified. Not waiting for Dmo Xian's reply, he had already opened his mouth. "We've finally found some clues. If you were to leave now, wouldn't it be a waste of effort?" Yiqing Luo casually blocked in front of Dmo Xian as her lips curled into a smile. "Miss Qing Gu, don't worry, Xian has no intention to leave the base now." Then, Qing Gu finally shifted her gaze towards Yiqing Luo. "What did you mean by what you said earlier?" Yiqing Luo's smile deepened, her long and narrow eyes were like a rose in full bloom, enchanting elegance. "Ah. What I said is right. Previously it was my Xian who had troubled you for several days. From today onwards, both of us will have to trouble you, Miss Qing Gu." As if she could not see Qing Ji's increasingly gloomy face, she continued to smile sweetly. "I believe, Miss Qing Gu, you will not reject me, right?" Qing Ji's face darkened and she clenched her fists. You want to stay here too?" "Well, a woman. Wherever Xian is, I will naturally be there." Yiqing Luo replied with a smile. You two aren't married yet, right?" Qing Ji's breath caught in her throat. Looking at the intimate posture of the two, she clenched her fists so hard that her fingertips turned white. Yiqing Luo tilted her head as she giggled. "As long as I want to, I can even get married now." Qing Ji's gaze was filled with complex emotions as she looked deeply at Dmo Xian, as though he was anticipating Dmo Xian to say a rebuttal. However, the man didn't even glance at her from the corner of his eyes. His vision fell onto Yiqing Luo's figure without blinking. As though in his eyes, other than Yiqing Luo, he couldn't see anyone else. Qing Ji's breathing quickened. There were a few times when he wanted to open his mouth and tear apart the girl's provocative and bright smile that was filled with mockery. But in the end, she suppressed the impulse in her heart. Her delicate eyebrows were slightly furrowed. Her gentle and elegant face revealed her noble majesty. She pursed her lips and said in a deep voice, "Miss Feng, it's not that I don't want to take you in, but this is the territory of the Palace of Darkness after all." She purposely emphasized the word, "take in," and smiled coldly. "The Overlord is staying here because I believe in your strength. Even if his lordship notices your existence, the Overlord can still leave the base of the Palace of Darkness quietly. But, Miss Feng, I don't think you can do it." Her judgmental gaze sized up Yiqing Luo from head to toe. His eyes were filled with mockery and disdain. "Miss Feng, as Lord Dizun's woman, you should learn how to share Lord Dizun's burden. You shouldn't recklessly create trouble for Lord Dizun just because Lord Dizun loves you." Qing Ji's every word was belittling Yiqing Luo. In Qing Ji's eyes, Yiqing Luo was merely a cultivator with low ability. Chapter 49:15. The only one that was presentable. Could only be the identity of Feng family's Mississippi. The most important thing was Feng Qing Luo. This Feng family's miss was not legitimate. She was merely the Feng family's adopted daughter on a whim. If she were to appear, presumably, the Feng family would not offend her just for this adopted daughter. Qing Gu thought in this way as the disdain in her eyes deepened. Facing Qing Ji's sarcasm, Yiqing Luo's expression had not changed at all. Her eyes were still curved as the ends of her eyelids arched upwards, curling into a glistening expression. That enchanting face was as exquisite as a blooming rose, blooming with the most dazzling elegance. Regarding this point, Miss Qing Gu need not worry. Yiqing Luo's voice was clear and melodious, like pearls falling on a plate, extremely pleasant to the ears. "I can't, Xian can. He will protect me. As Xian's woman, actually it's not as complicated as what Miss Qing Gu thought. As for me, as long as I stay by Xian's side enjoying his pampering, that's enough." Yiqing Luo hugged Dmo Xian's arm, leaning her head towards him, smiling sweetly. Women should be pampered, doted on, loved. But for someone like Miss Jianghu, at such an age, still alone, you should not understand this feeling. Qin Ji's expression before Yi Qing Luo's words finished seemed to be covered by dark clouds. The anger in her eyes was like a blazing fire. Her exquisite and elegant face uncontrollably twisted slightly. Jianghu. Diamo Xian opened his mouth indifferently as he shot a glance at Jianghu. If it's not convenient, I will return to the Feng family with little Luo, or first. I'll have to trouble you to send the ancient books here to the Feng family. The moment the man opened his mouth, he had completely stated his stand. Jianghu was an intelligent person. How could she not hear the warning in Diamo Xian's tone? If it was any other time, Diamo Xian didn't even want to say a word more to her. These few days in Diamo Xian's base, the words he said probably did not exceed 10 sentences. But today, the words he said exceeded the sum of all the words he said these few days. However, all of this was for the sake of that girl. A complicated light flickered in Qin Ji's eyes. From the bottom of her heart, the thought of obtaining Diamo Xian seemed to have taken root and sprouted, twining around her body and mind. The more he behaved this way, the more she wanted him. Such a perfect and outstanding man. It should belong to her. How could that Miss Feng of the Feng family compare with her? You want to stay here? That's great. Let Feng Qing Luo witness with her own eyes how her man, little by little, sank into her land of gentleness. When Jianghu looked up again, her expression was once again elegant and gentle. Her cherry lips curled up and her beautiful eyes focused. My lord won't be here today, so it's not inconvenient. Chapter 49:16. This one action fell into Qin Ji's eyes. This made the jealousy in her heart burn even more, as her brows overflowed with uncontrollable jealousy and hatred. Until she saw Diamo Xian condescending himself, as though he was carrying a precious treasure, carrying her as he turned around and left the study. Her jade-like fingers clenched tightly as the smile on her face slowly turned cold. She slammed the table heavily. The table full of books and paintings were scattered all over the floor. That damned Feng Qing Luo. She must have provoked her on purpose. Intentionally being so intimate with the overlord. He had purposely shown her how much the overlord doted on her and how much he loved her. Trying to use this method to make her give up? Impossible. Princess. A black shadow suddenly appeared out of thin air and knelt down respectfully in front of Jianghu. Do you need me to share Princess's worries? No need. Qin Ji's eyes were gloomy, her elegant face revealed a trace of noble arrogance. It's just a man, there's no need for you to do anything. She raised her delicate eyebrows, slightly raised her chin and arrogantly said, The overlord is a prey that I have my eyes on. Towards prey. I prefer to tame them myself. You better hurry up and find out the secret of the Palace of Darkness as soon as possible. My lord is too sensitive. The longer time passes, the easier it is for your existence to be discovered. Qin Ji's eyes sunk like a deep pool as deep as the sea. By then, there's a high possibility that I will be suspected by my lord. Yes. The black shadow's tone was solemn. After spitting out a word respectfully, the figure disappeared into thin air as soon as it appeared. The room fell into a dead silence once again, as if everything that happened earlier was just an illusion. Diamo Xian carried Yi Qing Luo all the way to the room next door. Pushing the door open, the room was filled with the unique sandalwood scent from Diamo Xian's body. Yi Qing Luo circled Diamo Xian's neck, raised her brows and looked at him. Looks like that Miss Jianghu treats you quite well. The room she arranged for you is in line with your style. Diamo Xian put her down. Still jealous? Jealous? Yi Qing Luo snorted coldly. Is she worthy? Could a rival in love, that posed no threat at all, be considered a rival in love? At most, she was just a die-hard fan of Diamo Xian. You're not jealous? Why do you look so pale? Diamo Xian's slender jade-like fingers pinched her face as he gave a low chuckle. It's all right to admit that you're jealous. I like to see you being jealous because of me. He took the girl's hand and held it tightly. I like to see you blocking my way, blocking other people's covetous eyes. I like to see you like a female warrior, declaring your sovereignty. I like seeing you care about me. Chapter 49:17. Her outstretched hand. She was held by the man's large palm. Beside her ear was his deep, husky, and mellow laughter. It made Yi Qing Luo's heart itch. She pushed him away and jumped onto the bed. Leaning against the headboard, she hugged her knees and glared at him. In times of crisis, we need to build a harmonious socialism. Prosperity, democracy, literacy, harmony, freedom. Stop flirting with me. Socialist core values do not allow it. DMO Xian. There was a faint melancholy that he didn't know where to start from. Yiqing Luo put on a serious face. That Qinggu, can you really trust her? DMO Xian sat down beside her. There's no need to believe me, I just need her position in the Palace of Nethergloom to make it easier for me to move around. I think there's something about her that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Yiqing Luo shifted her body over and leaned on him. It's better to be careful. If your honey trap fails and she bites back, we'll be in deep trouble. DMO Xian's thin lips curled up frivolously as he glanced sideways at her and pinched her little face. My little Luo, is really getting more and more powerful. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand. You've long sensed it? Yes. DMO Xian held her little hand and pinched it in his palm. Her motive should be the same as the person behind the Nether Palace. We don't have to interfere. Sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight? Yiqing Luo raised her brows as her pink lips curled into a teasing smile. Are we going to sit back and reap the benefits? DMO Xian's fingers, which were pinching her little hand, paused as he looked at her solemnly. You can sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, but don't think of reaping the benefits of the fishermen. You don't have to care about the dispute between the two forces. Yiqing Luo didn't ask why as her long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. Then what about you? DMO Xian froze for a moment and pulled her into his arms. Don't worry about me, I won't do things that I'm not sure of. That is to say, you will participate in their dispute. Yiqing Luo's head leaned against his chest. Her voice didn't reveal much emotion. DMO Xian's arms tightened. Because I have no choice but to interfere. She could hear the hoarseness and nervousness in the man's voice. She reached out and circled his waist. She pressed her face against his chest. He listened to the heartbeat in his ears. She sighed softly and said, But do you think this is something that I cannot participate in just because I don't want to? DMO Xian was silent. Yiqing Luo's little head arched slightly. Ah Xian, if their motive is all for the God Emperor's tomb, then there's absolutely no lack of me. As my mother's daughter, this is my unavoidable fate. Ah Xian, I know, you will definitely protect me, so I'm not worried at all. The man's low sigh floated down from above. The two of them hugged each other and did not speak again. The next day, calculating the time, it should be morning. The base of the Palace of Darkness was still dark. Outside the door, a large red lantern flickered and emitted an extremely faint light. Under the darkness, a ray of light approached from afar and stopped at the door of the room. An elegant and pleasant voice came from the door. Lord Dizun, can you get up now? I asked the kitchen to prepare some of your favorite breakfast dishes. Yiqing Luo's charming eyes rose as she looked at DMO Xian without blinking. The young lady's death stare made DMO Xian's body stiffen. Just as he was about to reject her, the young lady's soft voice rang first. Miss Qinggu has the heart, then I'll have to trouble Miss Qinggu to send the breakfast in. Seventh Miss who likes trash. Lord Dizun, please be gentler with your love for everyone to collect. Seventh Miss who likes trash. Lord Dizun, please be gentler with your love for me. Chapter 49:18. The person outside the door was stunned for a moment. The atmosphere in the air seemed to have turned much colder. Yiqing Luo naturally felt the change in the air as her pink lips curled into a teasing arc. After some time, the room door was pushed open. Qinggu was dressed in a white muslin long dress as she walked into the room with a fairy aura. That white lotus arm was carrying an exquisite and fragrant breakfast as she walked in leisurely. Her posture was elegant and her smile was just right. But the moment she stepped into the room, Qingji's smile froze on her face. She almost couldn't hold on to the tray she was carrying. Her face turned slightly pale as she looked at the scene in front of her in shock. The young lady dressed in red was hugging a 5 to 6-year-old boy with bright eyes and white teeth. She sat on the red sandalwood chair as her fair fingers pinched Xiaotuanzi's face from time to time. While DMO Xian, who was dressed in a black robe, stood behind the young lady. His slender fingers rested lightly on the back of the chair. His eyes drooped slightly as his deep black eyes gazed tenderly at the young lady. Golden boy and jade girl, a perfect match. It was a déjà vu feeling of a family of three. This warm picture of a family. It was like a thorn piercing into Qingji's eyes. The expression on her face was overcast, dark and gloomy. Miss Qinggu, what's the matter? Yiqing Luo's slender eyes raised as she looked at Qinggu with a smile. That bright-eyed Xiao Tuanzi and the young lady looked over at the same time. Two similar faces reflected in Qingji's eyes. Qingji's pupils constricted. This is yours? Feng Qing Luo actually had the overlord's child? How could this be possible? Look at this child's age. This meant that Feng Qing Luo and the overlord had known each other for at least 5 to 6 years. Yiqing Luo lowered her head to look at Xiao Tuanzi in her arms as she slowly stood up and fought alongside Diamo Xian. Her fingertips brushed against Xiao Tuanzi's face as she asked with a smile, "My Cici looks adorable, right?" The man cooperated as he circled his arm around the young lady's shoulder. It was also an indirect acknowledgement that they were a family of 3. Qinggu held her breath and stiffened. She placed the tray on the mahogany table and smiled in disbelief. This child looks very much like Miss Feng. Of course. After all, he was her little uncle's biological son. After all, he looked very similar to her mother. But when Qinggu heard this, she was stunned. It was a disguised admission. She and this little ball were indeed mother and son. Because only a mother and a son would look alike. You guys eat slowly. I still have something to do, so I'll be leaving first. After saying this, Qinggu turned around and left the room with a stiff body. Chapter 49-19. She stopped feeding and stared suspiciously at Diamo Xian from head to toe. Want a view for you whole page, please, but search. The man raised his hand and held the young lady's slender wrist. His slender fingers easily picked up the breakfast in the young lady's hand. After that, he held the young lady's hand in his palm. When do you intend to marry me? He stared at her eyes and asked seriously word by word. Yiqing Luo. So exciting early in the morning? Diamo Xian's eyes were clear, his peerlessly handsome face was like a god. I also want to have a child with you. His gaze slowly slid down to Yiqing Luo's stomach. Yiqing Luo. She had just woken up and started dreaming. Diamo Xian's long arms suddenly exerted force. The young lady was immediately brought into his arms. This action. Yiqing Luo had yet to react. She bumped into Feng Shi and fell into Diamo Xian's arms. Luckily Feng Shi's reaction was fast and she immediately stabilized herself when she fell off the chair. Shi, are you alright? Yiqing Luo immediately pried Diamo Xian's hand away and held Feng Shi's shoulder as she sized him up. Feng Shi shook her little head and blinked her clear eyes as she looked at Diamo Xian timidly, as though she was afraid of something. Yiqing Luo carried Feng Shi back to the chair and turned to stare at Diamo Xian. Don't scare Shi. Diamo Xian. He looked down at his empty arms. He felt that he had fallen out of favor. His gaze was filled with hidden bitterness as he stared at Yiqing Luo. Then you hurt me, what about this? That expression was like a large loyal dog. It made Yiqing Luo's eyes soften. She stared at Diamo Xian unhappily. There are still so many things that have not been settled, how can we talk about marriage, not to mention the sacred treasure? Diamo Xian drooped his head. His thick black hair hung down slightly and scattered on both sides of his cheeks. He revealed a somewhat dispirited posture. Yiqing Luo. This pitiful, like an abandoned large cute dog expression really made one unable to bear it. This man always had all kinds of fancy ways to make her compromise. Yiqing Luo sighed and softened her tone. It's not like I'm not marrying you. In this lifetime, I will only marry you and not anyone else. I'll only give birth to your baby. So, you don't have to worry at all. It was just a few simple words. And successfully smoothed out Diamo Xian's fur. Thousands of words of love. Not as good as one sentence, I won't marry anyone but you. Diamo Xian raised his head, his obsidian-like eyes sparkling and translucent. The rippling glazed light emitted a sincere and resolute light. He gazed at the young girl and said seriously and solemnly, I will marry no one else but you. A faint smile surfaced on Yiqing Luo's brows. She placed her hand on the man's large palm. Just as she was about to speak, someone tugged on her clothes. Xiao Tuanzi's crisp voice rang out, Fairy sister, Cici wants to eat that dumpling. Yiqing Luo immediately retracted her hand and turned her head to look at the edge of the table, at the stack of red bean dumplings that Xiao Tuanzi couldn't reach even if she stood on the chair. She stretched out her hand and placed the red bean dumpling in front of Feng Shi. Eat carefully, don't choke. Feng Shi nibbled on the dumpling contentedly. Diamo Xian. Damn, this lord has really fallen out of favor. He complained again as his gaze swept straight to Feng Shi. Aren't you going to send this kid back to the Feng family? Fourth watch. End of this chapter. Waste 7th miss. Overlord, be gentle with your love. Waste 7th miss. Overlord, be gentle with your love. Chapter 49-20. Yiqing Luo poured a cup of water for Fengxi before looking at Dmo Xian. The entrance is guarded tightly by the disciples of secluded palace. There's no way out. If possible. She wanted to send Fengxi back to the Feng family first. After all, Fengxi was staying here. It was an additional layer of danger. Furthermore, she wanted to take the opportunity to return to inform her grandfather that she was safe. To prevent him from letting his imagination run wild at home. Feng Liqiong's side would also alert the enemy. But this secluded palace base, it was easy to enter but hard to leave. Especially under the premise that she and Fengxi were discovered. Wanting to leave was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Dmo Xian's body leaned against the back of the chair, his peerless brows were filled with laziness, which made that elegant and handsome face even more unbridled. Lil Luo, must have forgotten. There's still me? Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up. That's right. Her dear Xian, it should be easy for him to leave the secluded palace base. She couldn't. There was still Xian. Looking at the man's arrogant look. How could Yiqing Luo not understand what he was thinking? The young lady stood up slowly, her fiery red dress fluttered and a blooming rose spun in midair. She had already walked past Fengxi and stood next to Dmo Xian. Two slender fair hands were placed on his shoulders as she leaned slightly and smiled. Then, I'll have to trouble my dear Xian. Dmo Xian raised his brows lazily as his beautiful thin lips curled upwards, giving a devilish smile. Why? You only remember that I'm your dear husband when you need me? Every moment and every second I'm thinking of Xian. Yiqing Luo's voice was soft and tender as she bent over slightly, leaning on his body. The man scoffed, a woman's mouth is a liar. Yiqing Luo? Where did her Xian learn this sentence from? Her Xian actually learned bad things. If it wasn't for the fact that she kept the core values of socialism in mind, she would have used her big move. Yiqing Luo took a deep breath as her little hand pinched the man's face, changing her big move to a small move. Don't tell me you wish for me to carry a little dumpling every day and accompany you by your side? Dmo Xian. No, he didn't want to. It was rare to meet Lil Luo, again. He only wanted to be with Lil Luo, at all times. I don't want to fall out of favor. So, I'll have to trouble you to send Cici back to the Feng family. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved into a crescent shape. At the same time, pass a message to maternal grandfather so that he can be at ease. Dmo Xian stared at Yiqing Luo's crafty smiling face. With a flip of his hand, he pulled her into his embrace. His chin rested on her head. The voice that floated down was filled with a deep sense of helplessness. You've got me, haven't you? Yiqing Luo gave an innocent and harmless smile as she blinked her eyes and spoke seriously. My grandfather is very concerned about the man I've taken a fancy to, so when you send Cici off, you'd better put on a good performance if you can't get past my grandfather. Get married? Have a baby? This isn't something you can do. With that, the girl patted his shoulder with a serious expression. I believe that my Xian is the best. Qinggu knocked on the door once again. Yiqing Luo looked outside the door at that graceful figure, as her lips curled into a smile with unknown meaning. She got up and opened the door. Miss Qinggu, what's the matter? When Qinggu saw Yiqing Luo, her expression turned gloomy for a moment. Her gaze went past Yiqing Luo and looked into the room. I remember that child. Is the one Princess Ling Long is looking for, right? 7th Miss who likes trash. Overlord, please be gentler with your love. 7th Miss who likes trash. Overlord, please be gentler with your love. Chapter 49-21. After Qinggu went back. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was amiss. Fengqing Luo looked no more than 15 or 16 years old. Feng family had announced to the outside world that she was 16 years old. And that child looked no different from 5 or 6 years old. How could he be the child of Fengqing Luo and the Overlord? Qinggu recalled that Princess Ling Long had led the secluded palace's disciples and attendants to search for the person. She immediately understood. She immediately sent someone over to Princess Ling Long to find out. Then she knew everything. That child was the person Princess Ling Long was looking for. His identity was Feng family's young master, the biological son of the acting god emperor. His relationship with Fengqing Luo was merely that of cousin brother. After clarifying all these, how could Qinggu still not understand? Fengqing Luo, that little slut, was teasing her. At such a young age, Not even married yet she shamelessly impersonated herself and gave birth to the overlord's child. Shameless. Xianxia was furious and annoyed. But she still had to maintain her elegant image. In this way, the attendant Xiaoqi whom Princess Ling Long wanted to capture, it was probably Feng Qingluo? If she were to inform Princess Ling Long about Feng Qingluo and the Feng family's young master, Qingji's eyes flashed past a deep and obscure glint. Miss Qinggu only found out now? The young lady's clear voice interrupted Qingji's thoughts. I thought Miss Qinggu already knew about it. It sounded like a very normal sentence. However, Qinggu could always hear the sarcasm hidden in the laughter. Qingji's face sunk a little. The young lady was still smiling sweetly, her narrow eyes curved and the corner of her eyes outlined a little ripple, which made her enchanting face even more attractive. So, Miss Qinggu wants to tell Princess Ling Long? Yi Qingluo tilted her head, vividly displaying the young lady's innocence. This purity and innocence. This caused Qinggu to feel even more frustrated in her heart. She really couldn't understand. How could the high and mighty overlord be the same as those ordinary people? He actually liked this kind of unpresentable lady? She thought that based on the overlord's identity and status, those who were worthy to stand by his side must be iron-blooded, outstanding ability, and able to share the overlord's worries. But not, like this Feng Qingluo. Apart from a slightly passable face there was nothing else. What else was outstanding about it? The overlord was actually such a shallow man? The more Qinggu thought about it, the more vicious her eyes became. She narrowed her beautiful eyes and sneered, your suggestion is not bad. If I tell Princess Ling Long, neither you nor the young master of the Feng family will live. I'm so scared. The girl pretended to be scared and patted her chest. Her long and thick eyelashes blinked. Then she changed the topic and smiled, but, Miss Qinggu, I'm afraid you've forgotten that I still have a xian. She gently touched her chin with her slender fingers and smiled brightly. Before Princess Ling Long came, a xian must have already brought us away from the base of the Palace of Darkness. The pigeon's original intention was to see the young girl panicking, but it didn't expect to be fed a mouthful of dog food instead. Was he showing off to her, provoking her? One Qinggu clenched her fists tightly, her gaze swept across the room. Where's the overlord? He saw that I don't have a good appetite, so he went to prepare some food for me. Yi Qingluo casually replied. Seventh Miss who likes trash. Overlord, please be gentler with your love. Seventh Miss who likes trash. Overlord, please be gentler with your love. Chapter 49-22. An invisible display of affection was simply a critical hit. This was clearly a blatant provocation. How could Qinggu tolerate it any further? Miss Feng, you are at least considered as the overlord's woman. I don't expect you to be of any help to the overlord, but at least, don't drag him down. In her eyes, the overlord was as noble and elegant as a god. He was actually preparing food for a woman? Was this still the overlord that she knew? Qingji's words. All of them were belittling Yi Qingluo. Yi Qingluo blinked her eyes as she explained seriously, it's not that it can be considered as such, but it is. She repeated every word, not just now I am the overlord's future wife. She finished her sentence with a serious face. Her pink lips curled into a sweet smile. May I know from what standpoint is Miss Qinggu speaking these words to me? The words that came out of that smiling young girl's mouth were particularly piercing. No matter how dumb Qinggu was, she could tell that this innocent-looking young lady was not someone easy to deal with. The so-called innocent look was merely a facade to deceive the overlord. Not waiting for Qinggu to speak, the young lady's long and narrow eyes were already curved as she slowly walked towards her. The fiery red dress was like an excited fire elf, burning with a seductive flame. The young lady seemed to be stepping on a sea of fire. She curled her pink lips into a sweet and soft smile, but her long and narrow eyes were filled with an oppressive aura. Miss Qinggu knows of my existence, but she purposely sends flirtatious glances at Xian right in front of me. Miss Qinggu, do you want to be my Xian's concubine? Qingji's pupils suddenly congealed. An obscure hurricane surged in her eyes. She was a dignified princess. How could she possibly be someone's concubine? This was simply a humiliation. However, the young lady seemed to be unable to see Qingji's gloomy expression as she smiled sweetly. Although, to be my Xian's concubine is considered as your blessings for several lifetimes. But her charming eyes were clear and bright, and a smile spread in her pupils. I won't allow it. As for me, I'm very possessive. I only want to have Xian to myself. The others don't even have a chance. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as her dazzling and bright face was filled with absolute elegance. So, with this kind of thinking of snatching my future husband, what qualifications do you have, what stance do you have? To stand in front of me, preaching to me? The girl was clearly smiling. Her eyes were also filled with that sweet and soft smile. However, the flames on her body and the cold light in her eyes were obviously provocative. Qing Ji's face darkened. This girl was indeed different from what she appeared to be on the surface. Dizun wasn't around. He would reveal his true colors. Her eyes turned gloomy as she suddenly closed in on Yiqing Luo, stretching out her hand and locked onto her neck. Feng Qing Luo, say it again. No matter how many times I repeat it, it's still the same. Yiqing Luo's expression didn't change as the corner of her eyes curled into a ridiculing smile. Miss Qinggu has flown into a rage out of humiliation? Qinggu locked onto Yiqing Luo's neck tightly as she pressed her against the wall. Feng Qing Luo, don't be unbridled just because you have the support of the Overlord. If I want you to die, even if the Feng family comes, they can only swallow it in silence. Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes in surprise. I didn't expect that as an esteemed guest of the secluded palace, Feng family, the acting god emperor's family could swallow it in silence. Miss Qing Ji's real identity, don't tell me? Chapter 49-23. Qing Ji's expression congealed. A trace of evil aura appeared in the depths of his eyes. The 5 fingers on the young lady's slender neck were filled with murderous intent. For a moment, that elegant and noble lady instantly turned into an Azura-killing god. What do you know? Qing Ji's voice was gloomy, as though it was wrapped in an extremely cold storm. The sudden increase in strength on her neck made Yiqing Luo's expression change slightly. But although Qing Ji's murderous intent was strong, but the strength was not to the extent of taking one's life. It was probably because of some misgivings. Yiqing Luo moved her neck and her fair hand slowly covered the back of Qing Ji's hand. She didn't try to pry Qing Ji's hand away. She just carelessly poked Qing Ji's hand bit by bit. Her voice was languid and calm. Miss Qinggu is so agitated, could it be that I accidentally poked into your unspeakable thoughts? Qing Ji's eyes were covered with frost, murderous intent. What on earth do you know? Originally I didn't know anything, but now it makes me curious, what secrets do you have? Yiqing Luo's slender brows rose slightly, her eyes filled with a smile. Miss Qinggu, why not? Satisfy my curiosity? I'm afraid you won't live to know. Qinggu stared at Yiqing Luo's eyes, as though trying to see if she was lying from her eyes. Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes. Really? Then you can give it a try. The young lady intentionally raised her neck so that she could easily clasp her neck. But you need to think about how to explain to Xian. Qing Ji's hand suddenly froze. The sinister expression on her face, which was filled with murderous intent, slowly receded. Yiqing Luo fearlessly curled her pink lips and continued, Miss Qinggu is so powerful that my godfather, acting god emperor, doesn't dare to provoke you. I wonder, will the imperial palace not dare to provoke you? Feng Qing Luo. Qinggu gritted her teeth and spat out her name. She stared at her angrily for a long time. Then she angrily released her hand from her neck. Yiqing Luo's expression was relaxed as she carelessly touched her own neck, slightly twisting her neck as she indifferently raised her brows. I'm really curious now, Miss Qinggu. Your real identity, what is it? Yiqing Luo's expression turned cold. Stop putting on an act. Qing Ji's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Don't think that I won't kill you. Indeed you don't dare. Yiqing Luo's lips curled up in ridicule without any hesitation. Do you think I'm like that kind of little white rabbit who doesn't know how to retaliate even if you bully me? Her fingertips gently brushed against her neck. On her jade-white neck that seemed to be giving off a velvet glow, the red mark from being pinched was really obvious. The corners of the young girl's lips curled into an evil smile, like a deadly and enchanting poppy that slowly bloomed. Miss Qinggu, you have to be careful of your own body. Acting. Qinggu snorted coldly, totally disregarding Yiqing Luo's words. But when she spat out these 2 words, his head suddenly felt dizzy. It was as if a gorgeous flower was blooming in front of him. He staggered and stumbled, leaning against the wall before he could barely regain his balance. Qing Ji's face turned pale. You? What did you do to me? Since Miss Chinga treats me as your love rival, then you should understand your love rival well. Yi Qing Luo smiled warmly as she watched Qinggu fall to the ground due to dizziness. Know yourself and know your enemy, then you will always be victorious. Chapter 49-24. She squatted down and met Qingji's gaze. I am most proficient in poison. She casually grabbed a lock of Qingji's hair and said, before you kill me, why don't you think about how to detoxify it? You. Qingji's face contorted in pain. You're despicable. Despicable? Yi Qing Luo raised her brows as her fingertips brushed past her forehead and gave a harmless smile. I am a vengeful person. Miss Qinggu wants to kill me, how can I remain indifferent? She suddenly loosened her grip on Qingji's hair. The lady fell heavily onto the ground. She gasped in pain. Yi Qing Luo stood up and looked down at Qinggu. Since Miss Qingji's ability is way above the Feng manner, then I believe Miss Qinggu has a way to detoxify it even if you don't need me. I shall not force Miss Qinggu to lower your noble head to me. I hope the next time we meet, Miss Qinggu will have the chance to kill me. Her words fell. Her fingertips moved and a flame feather fan was gently fanned. The hurricane swept Qinggu, who was lying on the ground, and pushed her out of the room. Bam! The room door was closed and Qinggu was locked outside. Yi Qing Luo remained silent for a moment and quietly went close to the door and looked outside. Qinggu, who had been thrown to the ground, had a face as pale as a sheet of paper and was slightly twisted and hideous. Her fingers were curled up weakly. She was angry, but she couldn't muster up any strength. Even the profound qi in her body seemed to have disappeared. Like a cripple lying on the ground, unable to move, Yi Qing Luo stood by the door and stared at Qinggu. About half a stick of incense later, a black figure silently approached the clear pigeon. Yi Qing Luo had yet to see the appearance of that black shadow clearly. In front of her, there was no one else. Qinggu was taken away by that black figure. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she wasn't too surprised. She squatted here and stared. He wanted to see exactly what kind of power stood behind Qinggu. She saw Qingji's reaction earlier. Presumably, the power behind her. It was an unspeakable secret. By the time Diamo Xian returned, it was already 8 hours later. In his hand was a large basket of fragrant and delicious desserts and dishes. Smelling that smell, Yi Qing Luo knew that this was done by Feng Pe. Have you sent Cici back? Yi Qing Luo held Diamo Xian's hand as she rubbed her head against his body. Diamo Xian nodded. At the same time, he placed the desserts and dishes on the table. Yi Qing Luo looked up at him. Looks like you've gotten grandfather's approval? From Diamo Xian's body, there was a faint fragrance of wine. This meant that he had drunk some wine. And there was only one thing that could make Diamo Xian drink. Drink with Grandpa. Moreover, Diamo Xian was carrying the snacks and dishes that Granny Feng had personally made. This meant that Diamo Xian was instructed by her grandfather to bring this food for her. As expected, Diamo Xian nodded again. He placed the wooden chopsticks in Yi Qing Luo's hands and pressed the young lady onto the table. Have a taste. He looked down. The man's vision fell onto the young lady's fair neck. For a moment, the gentleman's eyes seemed to be gathering a storm as his eyes were covered with frost. Your neck? What's the matter? He pressed the young lady's shoulder as he bent over slightly and looked at her neck. Seventh Miss who likes trash. Overlord, please be gentler with your love. Seventh Miss who likes trash. Overlord, please be gentler with your love. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.